Welcome to Capital Conversations. I'm Marty Owings. It's Tuesday, April 1st, 2014. And tonight we're joined on the program by Representative Ryan Winkler. Ryan Winkler is in his, fourth term?
Fourth term.
Fourth term up here at the Minnesota State Legislature. And he serves, what all communities do you, I mean, I know your hometown, but talk about the communities you serve.
Sure, I represent parts of Golden Valley, St. Louis Park, part of Plymouth, and the entire community of Medicine Lake.
All right, yeah, wasn't sure how far you were into Plymouth. I mean, there's been some redistricting.
Redistricting. My legislative district goes from the border of Minneapolis to 494.
Fair enough. Well, I was hoping you could come on tonight, and you were gracious enough to join us to talk a little bit about electioneering and your proposal to sort of change some of the rules around that. David Strom over at Politics in Minnesota wrote a piece saying legislature tells nonprofits to shut up. And he outlines some issues he has with the bill, including the fact that you may, under this bill, the way it's worded now, or the language is, stop a nonprofit from reporting, say, a legislator's voting record 60 or 30 days out of an election.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
Okay, so let's take this apart piece by piece. So Strom says, because it's defined as election engineering, in essence, that falls under the purview of
Sure, but it doesn't
language.
stop anybody from informing anybody. It simply says that if you're going to send out a piece of mail 60 days before a general election, and the piece of mail says that Representative X voted to support abortion doctors and terminate the life of unborn babies, and you do that right before an election, you're doing that to influence the outcome of the election, not because you're trying to provide a public service to inform voters about the voting record. If you send that piece of mail out, what the bill says is that you have to say who paid for the mailing. You have to disclose where the money came from. This bill is purely about disclosure. It does not say which group can spend money on what. It simply says that they have to disclose their sources.
Okay, so just to be clear, the mailing can still go out, but if it does,
Exactly.
the rule is you're going to have to say who you are.
You have to say who's paying for it. Yep.
Okay.
It's basic public right to know who's paying for what influence in our elections.
So it really doesn't tackle electioneering per se, because if they're willing to say it, they can electioneer all day long.
Exactly. If they're willing to say
Okay.
who's paying for it, they
Fair
can
enough.
say spend as much money as they want to,
So
in whatever manner they want to.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. So let's talk about the heart of the bill, why you wanted to propose it, and what led up to that.
Well, it was in a bill that we passed last year. After Citizens United, the Supreme Court has created a world where we can do less to restrict money coming into the political donation world. And since we can't restrict the money coming in, we're allowed to require more disclosure about where the money came from.
Fair
So
enough.
you've got fewer restrictions, more disclosure. The bill that we passed last year acknowledged that difference, but it left these provisions
Fewer
out.
disclosures.
More disclosure.
But now there's not that. You
Not
don't
for
have
the-
the transparency for PACs, mini PACs, super PACs.
We have some transparency, but we don't have, these are basically loopholes that are left in. So what we did last year was to increase the amount of money that candidates can spend in an election, because when you have all this third-party independent expenditure activity taking place, all this money flowing into elections, but candidates are restricted in what they can raise and spend to talk to voters. We end up with an election where the candidate himself or herself isn't even really in charge of their own campaign message. It's going through outside groups. So we increase the amount of money that campaigns can spend. We increase the amount of disclosure required around all spending. And at the same time, we did not include these provisions because basically Republicans insisted that they couldn't be in the bill. So we're coming back to that issue again this year to get the rest of the disclosure that we couldn't get past last year.
Well, and this isn't, it's nothing to do with you personally, but I question the wisdom in increasing money in politics to try to level the playing field. It seems like that might be just a bit counterintuitive, but Maybe you can explain why you feel like that has to
It's
happen.
not increasing the total amount of money in politics. It's changing so that more of it flows to candidates themselves, so that they can actually tell the voters what they're going to do or not do.
That's a clear distinction, yeah.
Instead of having these independent groups where there are no restrictions whatsoever in how much they can spend.
On the amount of money they can spend now, right?
And
It's free
if
speech.
they dominate, well, according to the court,
Right.
if they dominate the election, the candidate's voice is drowned out, and I think you miss something basic in the concept of our elections. It's not my preferred approach either, but it's the world we have to deal with after Citizens United.
Well, what about arguments from your opponents that say, a free market economy can apply to politics as well? And how has it affected, say, the local elections? The Democrats won the entire legislature and the governor's office without Koch brothers money and stuff like that.
Well,
what's your argument about
The Supreme Court certainly has embraced the free market idea that the answer to one group's paid advertisement is a paid advertisement from somebody else, and that there's a free market of ideas, which is sort of a nice idea if you just look at it in a narrow way. But if you look at it much more broadly and look at the impact and the corrupting influence of all this money flowing in, it's obviously very troubling. So, yes, the Democrats might be very good at raising money from their group, allied groups that are happy to raise and spend money, but it doesn't mean the system is better. Just because both sides can raise and spend huge gobs of money doesn't create a good campaign system.
So let's talk about specifics there. Where's the where's the corruption? What would you argue is, is it just the amounts of money, or is it money in general, or what about laws that, I guess we can talk about free and clean election laws in other states. I think New Hampshire, Arizona have some laws like that at the local level where they can't spend this money. It's just Joe running against Joe, I guess.
Well, you can't really do that much. I mean, you can restrict what candidates raise and spend, but you can't restrict third-party independent expenditures.
I see.
Even at any level, because of the Supreme Court's interpretation of the First Amendment. So I might not agree with that interpretation, but I don't have the choice to, I support efforts to try to move to amend the Constitution. I think that's a long-term, low probability approach to solving this problem, so I'd rather try to get practical and do it right now, right here in Minnesota. And the answer to that, in my mind, is to have as much disclosure as we possibly can, and to make sure that the candidate's voice is central to any election.
Let's talk about some recent examples where that's played a role, in your opinion, in politics, either at the local or national level.
Well, you can look at any contested state house race, for example, which I'm familiar with, and you can see mail pieces related to this kind of so-called issue advocacy, where you say, tell Representative so-and-so to stop voting to raise your taxes. And if that mail comes right before the election, that's obviously intended to influence that race. So we've got lots of literature from all kinds of races where this is being done.
Are there specific, issue-based, say, if last year's same-sex marriage, where there were, monies that might be an example of that, or I'm just thinking of the GBLT lobby and what was put into that. Third parties were obviously at work in that issue as well.
Right.
So some of your opponents argue, hey, that it works both ways. It's a level playing field, but
it does work both ways, but it works if you're looking at politics as being a battle between Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
It should be seen as a effort by the voters to elect people who represent them. And if the voters don't know who's paying for what messages, it's hard to evaluate whether they should believe that message or not. So if a business group is saying that this person is a bad representative because they voted against business interests, well, that is one thing, right? If you find out that somebody else who's a nonpartisan group that you trust is saying that, well, you might give it more credibility. So there's just
all right,
if you
welcome
can't
back to
control
Capital
how much money is
Conversations. In
coming
our second segment here, we're
disclosure
joined by
is the bare
Representative
minimum you
Ryan
need to do
Winkler,
that, so the
a
public can
four-term
understand it.
representative and someone who's strong advocacy for transparency. Here tonight, we're discussing that a little bit. So a moment ago, you had made mention of why you think it's unfair that people should sort of be so cynical or pessimistic about politics.
No, I just said that I said disengagement is what guarantees money will rule. And in fact, we've got a lot of examples in Minnesota in recent history where engaged citizens have the ultimate power over what takes place here. And I don't think people realize how much power they have. I think that's one of the biggest problems. If we have an issue at the Capitol and you get 10 emails about it from people that aren't generated by some interest group, they're just natural emails that people send in about an issue, that's a lot. That shows that there are a lot of there are people who engage. Think about that. 10 people send an email on one issue, and it's a powerful statement at the legislature. Individual voices make a big difference. And the more engaged people are, the more powerful they become. And, you know, in the end, all the money in politics that's raised and spent is for the sake of getting voters to tell us who they're going to elect, right?
Right.
If the voters just take charge themselves and don't worry so much about what the pundits are saying, or don't worry so much about what the ads or the mail's saying, but just get engaged and focused on who they want representing them, they're far more powerful. But they don't necessarily know just how easy it is, especially at the state level, to be engaged and take charge.
So, without being spending too much time on this point, so why the disengagement then? Why the widespread disengagement by the young people who just are like saying, same team, different jersey?
You know, I can't speak to, I mean, people are correct when they say that too often politics is run for insiders and by insiders. So I'm not saying that that isn't true and they shouldn't be concerned about it. What I'm saying is the answer to that is not more disengagement, it's getting involved. The only way to change it is to be involved, and I don't think people realize it takes some time. It doesn't take big money, it doesn't take powerful friends, it doesn't take, you know, a mastery of all the issues. It takes a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, and people can do it. So all I'm saying is get involved, your voice will be very powerful.
So if you're going to eat right, exercise, hold a job, do all these things, maybe spend a little bit of time focusing on politics, which can affect your life, I guess, right? Is what you're saying.
That's the whole
what I hear
idea.
you
And
saying.
I'd go one step further.
Yeah.
You're not a, you know, you're not a member, you're not an American and a consumer of American values. You're a citizen. You have obligations as a citizen, as a free citizen, to step up and play some kind of role in shaping our joint destiny together. And, you know, it's not a matter of just sitting back and complaining. You can sit back and complain about the quality of Comcast cable TV or the quality of anything else. That's what you do as a consumer.
Sure.
As a citizen, your obligations are at a higher level.
Okay, fair enough. So your work on transparency. There's a couple of people leaving the legislature that have sort of carried the water in that area for a while. I'm thinking of Mary Liz Holberg, advocates like Representative Paymeyer. Who's going to fill those roles? I mean,
Well,
what do you see?
those two in particular, I think of as being more interested in privacy issues.
Well,
Not
privacy,
so much,
right.
you know, it's,
Right.
I guess it's a little bit the same, but, you know, people will step up. Representative Holberg is proposing a legislative commission on data practices and data privacy so that you build up over time some more expertise among legislators on those issues, so that it's not just one legislator's interest that drives it, but kind of a more institutionalized role for legislators to be involved and knowledgeable.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea. I think it's something, you know, she's a Republican, this is the DFL legislator, but it's a good idea, and I would expect that that's a bill that we'll try to pass this year.
Okay. I think we'll wrap up here a little bit, but I wanted to talk to you about some of the governor's proposed, well, forget the governor, but the bonding bill.
Yeah.
The proposed bonding bill. Alice Hausman's proposal. It spends a lot of money at the University of Minnesota, and tuition keeps going up and up and up, and it's like that's a subsidized institution, understood.
Right.
But where all those monies are going, and then can you tell people, just a layperson who really is just fed up, like with the street stuff in St. Paul and other areas? I mean, I see nothing but rants about, you know, potholes and bad bridge construction. You know, it's like, wasn't that bonding, like, isn't that part of bonding's like basic infrastructure?
Well,
right?
it is infrastructure,
Yeah.
although typically we have not used the bonding bill as a vehicle for paying for a lot of road and bridge and transit types of things, and we probably should. Typically, it's been more construction projects, and most of what we spend, for example, at the University of Minnesota or the state colleges and universities, is maintenance kinds of things to maintain what we have. I do think that there's a big role in transportation that we're not meeting as a state.
Yeah.
But I expect that will be something that we address in the next legislative session. And the fact is,
But this is the bonding year, right, Representative Winkler?
that's not written in the Constitution.
Didn't happen last year, though.
But we don't typically put those projects in the bonding bill. We usually pay for them as we go and try to have money through the constitutional dedication of funds of the gas tax pay for transportation type projects. So, I think we could do better with transportation in the bonding bill, but historically that's just not the way we paid for it.
Well, the money, the way it's allocated here, it's like universities, civic centers, some for transportation, but only 21, and I say only, but that's a lot of money, but compared to the overall omnibus bill here. Parks and Trails get 62 million, which is more than transportation, which seems odd. 41 million on public safety, but most notably I think St. Peter Hospital and some hospital stuff. But this 175 million on the University of Minnesota, and then another 193 on the Minnesota State Colleges and University system. Just, I'm not saying the higher learning isn't a bad investment. Obviously, it is, but I said that wrong. It's a good investment. Yeah, I appreciate that. All I'm saying is that it seems like a lot of money to institutions that they seem like they get a lot of money already.
They do get a lot of money already.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question about it. So. But it's hard to say that the university, as you said, it's hard to say that those are bad investments.
Right.
Typically, if you want road and bridge improvements, we pay for that through the gas tax. We have a special constitutionally dedicated fund for roads and bridges. Every dollar that you raise in the gas tax or raise from the gas tax goes into that dedicated fund and pays for road and bridges. And I think next session we're probably going to look at the possibility of increasing the gas tax or doing something else to shore up our transportation. Well, it may be unpopular, but the fact is that if you want decent roads and bridges, you have to pay for it somehow. The money doesn't just appear.
You got this $1.2 billion surplus, right?
But that's a one-time situation. If you want to have good roads and bridges, it takes annual maintenance, it takes annual replacement, and have a construction season that continues, and you have to have ongoing money. And by and large, the gas tax, as long as it keeps up with inflation and the cost, has been a pretty good way of paying for that.
Fair enough. Finally, you said that the marijuana bill might be a little bit of gubernatorial drama this year that the legislature may not have to deal with. There were some hearings, but it seems like that went nowhere once the governor said, I'm going to veto until law enforcement gets behind this. And then there's some controversy with him meeting with people saying things that they say he said and didn't say and blowing back and forth. So what the heck?
I'd be
what's
happy
going
to
on?
give you the fun. Well,
what's up?
I think that medical marijuana bill, I think, would pass the legislature if the governor were willing to sign it.
Yeah.
It had no problem moving through the House Health Policy Committee, for example. It had no problem moving through other committees that I'm on. Okay. I really think we would probably pass it and sign it into law, but the governor and his concerns from a law enforcement perspective is putting kind of a damper on that, but otherwise I think we would go.
And when we talk about like passing a medical marijuana bill, are we talking about medicinal liquid pill form, but no smoking of marijuana, or what?
I think we are talking about including smoking in that, but I'm not an expert on the issue.
Sure. All right. And have you seen any of the projections on money that might raise for the state, like Colorado's having some windfall from the sale?
I've heard a little bit about the Colorado windfall, but I think the more you loosen up any restrictions on marijuana, you probably start seeing more of that money. But I think that's more moving towards recreational legalization rather than medical legalization.
That's what bothers law enforcement, right? I mean, that's the part.
It's a slippery slope,
concern.
right?
It's always a slippery. If we let you do it, then we're gonna have to let everybody do it, right?
Well,
yeah.
I think there's probably some truth in that.
Okay. Anything else going on? You got an election year coming up here. Lots of campaign speeches are going to be happening on the floor, or what?
Usually are.
You're going to tidy that up this year, or what?
Tidy what?
The electioneering speeches on the floor towards the campaign literature stuff?
It's free speech. The voters will have to decide whether people are using their time at the state legislature wisely or not.
Okay, fair enough. I know you're a hockey fan. I know for little people you are.
Yeah.
You following the Wild at all? Or
Little bit.
Going to be interested in the playoffs and
Yeah.
make it? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well,
More
it's
of an
good.
amateur hockey fan than professional, but
Sure. Yeah. Well,
as any good Minnesotan should be.
yeah, that's right. Well, always good to see you, and thanks for
too.
stopping by, and I hope to have you on before the session goes dark this year, so.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thank you,
Thanks.
Representative
Speaking of
Winkler.
going dark.
Yeah, exactly. That's it for tonight. We'll see you next week here on Capital Conversations.